Hello and welcome to House Beautiful, How Britain Lives. This is the first of a series of podcasts, and today we're going to discuss multi-generation living. Those of you who've been down to London's Earl's Court Ideal Home Show will have seen the multi-generation home styled by House Beautiful and built by Future Form Modular. Today I've got with me in the studio an old friend, Judy Stone, who's a teacher in Derbyshire and has 2 adult daughters and lives with her nearly 90-year-old mum, Gwenda, and Steve Barrett, who's managing director of Future Form Modular, and we're going to discuss the practical, legal, financial and emotional aspects of multi-generation living and what the construction industry can do in the future to help to solve this growing problem. Judy, so can you tell us a little bit about how you came to be living with your mum?
Well, I've always been very close to my mum. Our lives have been interlinked. She's given me a lot of support over the years. She moved up to Derbyshire when my children were young and helped me to support them when I got divorced, when they were still at school.
They were quite little then, weren't they?
4 and 7.
Yes.
So I did rely on my mum a lot.
Because you were working full-time?
I was working full-time, yes. She lived a few minutes walk away, but then moved actually next door but one. So we were already quite close.
Yeah. And she used to do the school run?
Yes, she really just stepped in and sort of got them on the school bus and went to all the assemblies and things that I couldn't do. So obviously I've always had a close bond with her. And
then what used to happen sort of, socially? Did you meet as well? Did you used to have Sunday lunch together?
Yes, we usually had Sunday lunch together. But she was always a very independent person. Yes. She made a new life for herself up in Derbyshire. Yes. Made lots of friends.
Well, of course, I know your mum, and she's a lovely and very independent and very warm person. Yeah. So you couldn't think of anyone better to look after your children, as is a saying that happened with me and my mum, actually. So, but then you were living next door but one for how many years? A fair few years?
Probably 15 years, perhaps 14, 15 years.
And that worked fine?
Yes, it was fine until obviously things started to change as mum got older. Well, and actually as I got older.
Yes.
You start to have different needs. And mum's health started to decline a little bit. Mm-hmm. Both houses probably needed quite a lot of work doing to them.
But they were lovely, quite new houses, weren't they?
Well, they were 60s built houses.
Right, okay.
But in order to, we would have spent a lot of money on mum's house to get it up to spec.
Yes, really. I think you felt she needed a new kitchen.
Yes, all sorts of things started to need replacing. At the same time, I was beginning to feel that I needed to cut down on work. I was feeling quite stressed, working full-time. Also, because I'd been a single parent, I knew that I wouldn't be able to pay my mortgage off, quickly. Mm-hmm. I'd got to work a lot longer than I really wanted to pay it off. And sort of the two things combined, it just seemed logical to buy something together.
So how long ago did you do that?
I think we're in our 4th year now.
Right.
Living together.
Okay. And of course, you also had Ruth, your younger daughter, coming home from university.
Yes. And I started living with my partner.
So we
went from my partner and I were on our own, and suddenly Mum came to live with us because she sold her house first. And then Ruth came home from uni.
So there were the 4 of you.
It was quite crowded in Sydney with only one real living room.
Yes, I remember visiting and thinking you managed it brilliantly. So you've moved now. So by joining forces, you managed to move to a 4-bedroomed detached home, which is just over the road, which is perfect for your mum because she's still in the familiar location.
That was it. It was. We found actually that was one of the most important things when it came down to it. Not to sort of take her out of her comfort zone.
Yes, because you'd actually found something else that was a bit more ideally constructed.
We'd found a lovely bungalow that would have meant I wouldn't have to have a mortgage as well, and it had got everything that Mum would need downstairs with a nice bathroom, but then it had been opened up into the loft. There was a lovely big bedroom with an ensuite that would be great for Gordon and myself, and 2 more bedrooms. And there were 2 a bedroom and a living room for Mum downstairs, as well as all the normal living room and kitchen. So that would have been ideal. But then various things happened, and it became apparent that my mum didn't feel comfortable with moving to a slightly cheaper area of the town.
Yeah.
Luckily a house came up across the road which was not so suited in some ways. It didn't have an ensuite, which we thought was a priority.
Mm-hmm.
It only had one kitchen, which we'd been thinking in the other house we'd put in a kitchen.
So but other than that, it's suited, and she was in her familiar neighbourhood. So that brings me to
it, yeah.
So your advice to other people, and this is perhaps where I can bring Steve in, is 2 bathrooms rather than 1, 2 kitchens rather than 1.
Yeah, obviously, depending on how well or how independent the older person is, but I think so, really. Yes. So Steve, if we can talk a little bit about the concept of the multi-generation home that we've developed, which is at the Ideal Home Show at the moment. Around 1 in 100 households at the moment live in multi-generation setups, and I think that equates roughly to around about between 500,000 and 600,000 people. I mean, those are conservative statistics built on a survey last year by the Office of National Statistics. And we know that it's a trend that's set to grow, and that's a snapshot at one particular time. So obviously, before and after that, many other people might have lived in that setup, because we know, as Judy experienced, that children come back, boomerang children, and then go off again to university, or after university or college will go and live in a flat, and it doesn't quite work out, and then they come back again. So can you tell us what's so different and so special about the multi-generation home that Futureform has constructed?
Yes, I think that one of the things we've found over the last 10 years or more is that there have been innovations in the building sector, mm-hmm. and there have also been changes to standards, lifetime home standards being one that was
mm-hmm.
introduced by the government in the early 2000s. And therefore, the method of construction is very important for new homes, because new houses nowadays need to be far more flexible in the way living space is utilised.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things we've tried to incorporate into the generation home, as shown at this year's Ideal Home Show, is the use of centralised service cores.
Right.
Now, just to explain what modular or volumetric construction is, because it's quite different from traditional forms
mm-hmm.
of construction. Traditional forms of construction generally tend to be brick and breeze block, or slightly more recent homes are made from timber frame
mm-hmm.
with brickwork. But they're not always that flexible in being able to move internal partition walls around that easily.
Yes.
And with a volumetric modular system, such as the Futureform one, the overall floor plan of a module can be anything from 3.5 to 4.5 metres wide, and 9 metres up to 14 or 15 metres long.
So just to give us an average room, would you say, 12 by 12, 12 by 14?
Well, an ordinary room
mm-hmm.
would be 12 by 12, but with the modular construction, you can divide a much, much bigger area of the building,
right,
from a huge open space. I believe you came down to our factory at Shoreham by Sea and saw the modules when they were in their basic form before
mm-hmm.
fit out, and then we can break them down with internal partition walls, and they're based around where the central services are. So they will have water, electricity, sewage,
mm-hmm.
gas, all in centralised cores. And what that means is then you can easily access services for use as an extra bathroom, a shower room, a kitchen.
So Judy's mum could have had her own bathroom and her own sort of kitchen, which would have been sort of more practical in a way.
You'll see.
And also any changes that I might make to the house, for the way I want to use it, they're a bit, they're not just temporary, are they? Whereas you're saying if temporarily you wanted it one way,
you could change it around. The exterior walls are also quite flexible. The way that we design homes nowadays using the Futureform building system means that we can create additional openings. So if you wanted to put an extension on the back of the house, it's very easily done. And it doesn't require a lot of expense or a lot of re-engineering work on the main building structure. You have to be careful. Obviously, you don't just go and cut a big hole out or start moving things without advice. But that advice can be got from a number of places easily. Mm-hmm. But it is very, very easy to change the usages of each of the house areas from one purpose to another, changing from a living area to a bedroom, or back is quite easily done. But if you're moving a kitchen or a shower or bathroom, you've got to know that you've got the basic services to do that.
Right. So if Hannah or Ruth came back temporarily, you could adapt the house, to suit them, and then if they went off again, you could reconfigure it.
Well, that would be great, because I've thought about the resale value of my home, and if I did put an ensuite in, say, it would make one of the bedrooms very tiny, and it would hardly be a 4-bedroomed anymore. But that way, the next person
just as easily take it out and move it to another area.
And that also brings us actually to another point, Judy, which I think one of the reasons why you got together with Mum was obviously because you could get somewhere more spacious if you pooled your resources, and get somewhere that you could both live in. So you've got 4 bedrooms, and your mum's got her own sitting room, and you've got a separate sitting dining room, and your mum's got lovely views over your lovely garden, hasn't she? But one of the interesting things about this modular construction format, Steve, am I right, is that it's very, very affordable.
Yes, we find that certainly the cost of producing this type of housing has been falling over the last 10 years as we've innovated and we've brought in new materials and components, and the speed with which the houses are put together. And also that you can achieve a very high quality very quickly because they're all put together in a factory environment. Things like snagging, which is putting right the initial defects that you get with buildings as they go up, are done as they go down the production line.
And you don't get held up by bad weather and with wet trades, you can't...
I haven't lost a day all winter, and I'm sure that can't be said for any construction
Not with this wet winter. I'm sure that's not the case. So can you tell us, the house that's on show at the moment, what would you say, what would be its asking price?
Well, the asking price depends upon the site on which it's put. So I can't give you a sale price, but the modular house from the ground up, if you like, could cost anything from 70 to 120,000, depending on the quality and number of kitchens, showers, bathrooms, because everyone likes to personalise their house, and you can do that with this kind of construction.
And particularly in the southeast, that makes it very affordable. I know, Judy, in Derbyshire, prices haven't quite rocketed in the same way. But there's no reason perhaps why you couldn't even have a mini version in your back garden for the girls, say.
Well, that would work. I think people tend to think that cost is only important in high value areas such as the southeast, where land is expensive. But of course, it's just as important in an area where land may be cheap. But because of that, the building values are also relatively lower. So therefore, the cost of construction is equally important, if not more so. And I think that's been one of the things that we found of interest at this year's Ideal Home Show. We get people coming from all over the country. It doesn't matter where they've come from. They've all thought that the house seems to be very, very good value for money.
Good, that's tremendous. Thank you, Steve. So, Judy, can we just talk a little bit more for people who are considering living like this about how you actually blended your 2 generations? How did you, for example, decide between your daughter Ruth and your mum, Gwenda, who was going to watch on TV, what you were going to eat for supper, who was in the bathroom first, etc., etc. How did it actually work?
Well, you do have to be a little bit more routine than you would if you were just living on your own, obviously. And we've sort of evolved a kind of unsaid plan for who gets up first, who goes in the bathroom. We always eat it together in the evening. And obviously my part of the house, as we are now, that's really for myself and Gordon. So Mum kind of tends to get invited into that part, whereas she's got her own lounge, and I pop in and see her. Well,
because you're much more mobile than your mum, because you haven't really mentioned that your mum's kind of got restricted eyesight.
Yeah, she has now, which obviously it's made it more and more useful that we are all on the same, in the same place. But obviously you do have to be very sensitive to each other's needs, and it sometimes can be a bit of a juggling act. But obviously a house that's designed the way yours has been, you've got these sort of kind of out areas, haven't you, where
mixture of communal spaces, and private breakout areas, as we've called it. So we had a sort of glass room where mum could go and have an amazing bath and look at the stars. You know, there's a sort of breakout sitting room for the other generation, and there's a home office in the spacious hallway, which again, so there are areas where you can get away, as well as a communal dining area as well, all leading on to the kitchen, so that everyone can get to the kitchen as they need to. So what would be your advice, Judy, if somebody were thinking about this and were thinking of setting it up? What would you say are the things to be wary of?
Well, you've got to be absolutely sure as a family that you can get on to the right level, because for some people it just wouldn't be the right thing to do.
No.
Having said that, obviously when you do start living with each other again after a number of years, it's like living with somebody that you don't really know, and you have to kind of accept each other's foibles. Obviously, you've got to be sure that legally you've got everything tied up properly. You know, everybody needs to have an up-to-date will and things like that.
Advantages?
Well, the advantages are, well, I can only speak personally. It's enabled me to cut down on my work commitments because I'm financially a little bit more stable, because Mum's put some money into the property. Of course, you know, she's got hopefully the pleasure of having us on hand. She's got us on hand. We can take her, you know, to all her appointments and help her to be as independent as possible.
Yeah. And I suppose, sorry to interrupt, but I was going to say as well, you know, you've got, whilst the girls are both away at the moment, you also know you've got the space in the house to comfortably accommodate them if they come back.
I mean, obviously it's hard for the young people to save up enough for a deposit for their own property, so I know my elder daughter started thinking that she would like to buy somewhere, and she's tentatively said, would it be possible if I wanted to come back, say, for a year, so that I can save up the deposit. So... Yeah. You know, you need space for everybody. You never know what's going to happen next. Really, in families, do you?
I think that's the same with most families. We've got 3 grown-up sons now, but they've all been away to university. So we've had periods where the house has got a bit quieter. Then they've had to come back because they can't afford to live anywhere else.
Yeah.
Our middle son has lived in his own place for a few years, but he may need to come home in order that he can save.
I mean, we are the classic sandwich generation, aren't we? And we are, you know, whereas we left, our children now, it's a much more kind of flexible and impermanent relationship, and they seem to think that they can come back, and I guess we like them to come back, but we need to make sure that we've got the room for them comfortably.
Yeah. I think also that when you're looking at buying a house with living with older children as they grow up, and parents or other family members, there are quite a few other things that you need to bear in mind. Accessibility, particularly as you were saying, your mother's got poor eyesight, but often mobility is equally important. Making sure that there aren't too many steps, you know, in a house, or that there is even a position within the house to put one of these hydraulic lifts that you can get nowadays to get from ground to first floor.
Yes.
I think with a lot of older properties, that's not so easily done.
The design just doesn't allow it, does it?
Lifetime home standards have incorporated into the house designs areas in which a small lift could be placed, so that you can get access from one floor to another.
Yeah.
And just step thresholds, things like that.
And the point you're making, I think, Steve, is that in a modular construction, that's easier to put in rather than in an older established building.
I think designers, architects and the like bear these things in mind. They have to be compliant with the latest building regulations.
Yeah.
But if you're buying a house that's being designed and built, you know, a couple of decades ago, you won't find those things built into the design. And
also at the younger end, thinking of the children coming back, a very well insulated and soundproofed room, because, you know, everybody is on different time clocks and music, computer games, friends, just the noise that comes with our beloved children when they come home is so much easier to cope with if you've got well soundproofed and well insulated rooms.
I think that's probably the one thing that people pick up on more than anything else when they're walking around one of our volumetric modular homes, is how quiet they are.
Yes.
They have been used in the hotel and student accommodation sector where sound is so important.
Yeah.
And therefore the specifications that we design to these days take into account all those lessons we've learnt in those other construction sectors, and the houses benefit hugely from the high
good
levels
soundproofing.
of soundproofing insulation.
So Judy, do you have to watch the sound levels in your house? How loud you have the TV, or if you have music on, or is your house? Could you and your mum hear each other's sort of noise?
Yeah, we can actually.
Yes.
Sort of, when we're both watching the same programme on television, there's a slight delay.
Echoey.
So if you're standing in the middle, you're hearing it reverberating. But yeah, it's not designed obviously for that. And if one of us has got to get up very early in the morning, we tend to creep around.
Yes.
And Mum actually found that the hardest. She thought she would be disturbing us because she hadn't actually shared a home with anybody for a long time.
Yeah.
Whereas we were more used to having the children or being with each other. So she actually found that she was sort of treading on eggshells for quite a long time when she first
in case she woke
with
you
us,
up,
in case she disturbed us, which.
But you've got used. Well, thank you both very much. I think we've just scratched the surface today. This is House Beautiful Out Loud, and we've just been discussing multi-generation living as part of How Britain Lives, our new series. Please come and see us at the Ideal Home Show, which is on until Sunday, the 29th of March. Thank you very much to Judy Stone and Steve Barrett, MD of Futureform Modular. Thank you.
Thank you.